If you've been following college football news in the offseason, wedged between stories like Texas State joining the Pac-12 and Jake Retzlaff transferring away from BYU, you might have heard some news about the House settlement and what it means for college athletics. I try not to get into politics on the channel, mostly because it doesn't really apply to the sport all that often, but here's one of those areas where it technically does. This is because it doesn't just affect the way college football teams will construct their rosters from now on, it'll affect the transfer portal window entirely. So, I'm going to start by looking at the transfer portal window and how it works right now. We're going to look specifically at football in the last year, as the fall window opened on December 9th of 2024 and closed on December 26th for players looking to leave their team and find a new one before the recruiting period ended. That was only a few weeks, but hundreds of players entered the transfer portal window during that time period. College football also wasn't done playing yet, since that was when a lot of seasons were just about to end and bowl games were being played, so you saw a lot of players sit out bowl games and enter the portal afterwards so they could find a new team. It was all very fascinating. Today, we're going to talk about the transfer portal, we're going to talk about how it all works, and the new transfer portal window that a couple days ago we found out about. There's going to be another period here soon where players can find new schools, and while some people think this is really bad, this one for once actually makes sense. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the newest transfer portal window. Yeah, the more controversial window happened this past spring, as lots of players would come into the programs and start practicing with them for spring ball, which would mean that some players who didn't know their spot was necessarily going to be taken would now be able to leave. So there was a second portal window for college football players, which takes place from April 16th and went till April 25th. That's when a lot of the crazy movement last took place, with the biggest story being Nico Imaliava getting kicked off of Tennessee and having to transfer to UCLA after trying to get more NIL money. It was kind of a crazy situation, and it wouldn't have been possible without the spring transfer portal window. All while this was going on, the NCAA was looking into a few things about college sports, and one of them had to do with the transfer portal window, among some other things. Named after Arizona State swimmer Grant House, who was a part of a group of lawsuits against the Power 5 conferences that essentially set out to eliminate the middleman in payments between conferences, schools, and players. Now, each school will be able to directly make NIL payments to student athletes at their school without having to go through other third parties. That doesn't mean that the third parties won't also be working with players, but it just means that the schools won't have to go under the table if they want to pay the players directly anymore. A running back at Texas Tech can still have a deal with Whataburger, but he'll also get money directly from Texas Tech now. The main thing the House settlement focused on was scholarship limits for sports, because there's a set limit on how much players can be paid. It essentially creates a hard cap on roster spots for players on those teams, and that's why you might have seen a few players enter the transfer portal for your team that probably wouldn't have on a normal team, and it's because the team doesn't think they'll play and they need to get a certain number of roster spots in order to make the money fit across the roster. So this isn't just a problem for non-revenue sports like swimming and baseball, but for walk-ons. They now essentially don't get a roster spot anymore. But what does this have to do with the new transfer portal window? Well, the House settlement with the NCAA took until June, which was after the spring transfer portal window closed. Like I said before, you probably saw a lot of your team's players entering the portal early, and that was because the coaches at those schools anticipated this ruling coming and didn't want to have a whole bunch of guys just sitting around not being able to practice or play football. According to John Bryce at the Football Scoop, one coach said, quote, "We already designated our guys last week. It's good for them, but this crap is confusing already." These coaches still like their players and want them to succeed, even if they can't do it at their school anymore. So telling them to enter the transfer portal and find a new team was the best option instead of just cutting them, which is good. But since football's rosters are now expected to be capped at 105 scholarship players, and teams missed the window, they decided to make another window before the season started because it definitely was needed. So in order to fulfill that role, the NCAA has allowed a one-time portal window, which will be open from July 7th of this year and would run till August 5th. Part of this rule is that athletes who transfer will be called designated student athletes, which means they're part of the one-time window and won't be subject to the same timeline restrictions as the other players in the portal. In order to transfer in this one-time portal window, athletes will have had to lose their roster spot due to the new limits, likely third or fourth string guys. They had to have been eligible during last season and were originally guaranteed a roster spot before the House settlement took place, but after the settlement lost their spot on the roster. Schools will have until the 6th to designate those players as a designated student athlete. So what does this mean for college football? While it sounds like it might mean a lot at the moment, not many college football experts think there'll be much of a change when compared to normal. According to Matt Zenitz at CBS Sports, one Power 4 general manager called the new portal window a nothing burger and did not think it would have much of an effect on bigger teams in the sports world. No one of note will be entering during this window. These are kids that we essentially don't find good enough. And according to the rules, the players themselves don't have any choice in whether or not they enter the portal either. If they're designated by their school as a designated student athlete, they're essentially being cut without it being mutually agreed on with their coaches. Another general manager said, quote, "Players don't have any leverage during this time period, and the schools have all the leverage." So it is really unlikely this new transfer portal system will see any real big Power 4 teams trade playmakers back and forth with each other. Typically, when a great player leaves a team and goes to another one, there's a lot of media around it, and people pay a lot of attention to what it means for both schools. But if a team is sending their 4th-string guard out into the portal window, and he ends up in the FCS or even D2, like what's going to probably end up happening with this window, there won't be that many people interested anyways, and in those players moving from these teams. As far as I know, this is the first time that schools are really being given the opportunity to force their players out the door into the portal, since most of the time it's either mutual or the players make their own decision and do it on their own. Like I said before, this is essentially cutting with extra steps because the House settlement made it so that schools have to cut down their roster limits pretty significantly. It's also a pretty big deal that this is supposedly a one-time thing. By having it be just this year, and in response to the House settlement, the NCAA isn't allowing it to become a new rule or a future headache that affects every team for multiple years. Since most teams have already cut down their roster spots and don't have all that many players to send back out into the portal, it doesn't really affect the bigger teams. But it may have an effect on some of the smaller ones right now. But after this year, every team will understand the new limits on the roster and scholarships, so it's unlikely they'll have to worry about it for longer than just this offseason. There's a lot of really confusing stuff out there in college sports right now, and when I first saw this tagline, I was honestly confused too. But it really isn't important or as scary as it sounds, and I don't really think that anything too major or monumental will come from it. But if it does, I'll definitely have to come back and talk about it, because that'll be one of the craziest comeback player stories in modern college football history. Like, imagine this for one moment. There is a receiver who's like 6th on the depth chart for Alabama, and they decide to cut him at the last minute. He transfers over to Sacramento State and becomes Jaden Rashada's #1 weapon. After the year is over, Sacramento State is not allowed to go up to the FBS, so they decide to transfer to another school, and all of a sudden this guy becomes a big name. I'm sure there will be a story like that, but that is definitely going to be the outlier. Most of these guys will end up at an FCS or a low-level FBS team and will never be heard from again. But there will be one story of a guy who was cut and was named a designated student athlete who becomes an NFL draft prospect. I absolutely guarantee it, but this does not seem like it'll be common, as it's a one-time thing, only for 2025. But what do you guys think? What do you think of this new transfer portal window? What do you think of the roster limit? And what is your general opinion on college football moving forward? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.